Hey good people, and welcome back to the channel. In a few moments, I'll be sharing my thoughts and feelings on Black Panther 2, otherwise known as Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Now, because I believe in transparency, I think it's important to mention the mindset that I had when coming into this movie, and this will require a few minutes of your time. For the past 25 years, I've been a huge fan of the Black Panther character. I've read the comics, and I've seen the Black Panther character featured in several of the animated series. So when I initially learned that Chadwick Boseman was cast as Black Panther, my excitement went through the roof, because one of my favorite comic book characters of all times will be brought to life. However, while I appreciated Chadwick Boseman's portrayal of Black Panther as a character, I was definitely not a fan of how Marvel watered down T'Challa's abilities and his intelligence from the comics. So going into this Black Panther sequel, it was my hope that the movie would build on the T'Challa character the same way that Thor Ragnarok built up Thor, and how Captain America the Winter Soldier amplified Steve Rogers in multiple ways. Unfortunately, the passing of Chadwick Boseman was not only tragic, but the pain was felt by millions of people across the world. Nevertheless, Marvel was faced with a decision on what to do with the T'Challa character. And instead of recasting T'Challa with another actor, the studio decided to not recast T'Challa, which in their justification was because they wanted to honor Chadwick Boseman. This is a decision that I disagree with for a number of reasons. For one, I believe there was so much story to be told with the character T'Challa. In the comics, he was married to Storm from X-Men. Also in the comics, he would go on to be an important member of the Avengers, and he also had a collaboration with the Fantastic Four. So to kill this character off, when other main Marvel characters were given at least 3 solo movies to tell their story, was silly to me. Second, T'Challa already died in Avengers Infinity Wars. To bring him back for Avengers Endgame, only to kill him off again in his next movie appearance, is also silly storytelling to me. And lastly, over 10 years ago, the Spartacus series on Starz came out, and after the first season, the actor who played Spartacus died of cancer before the filming of the second season, and the studio was faced with a decision on whether to end the series or recast the role. They ultimately decided to recast the role, and by the end of the series, the fans grew to love the new lead character, and the show was also able to properly honor the memory of Andy Whitfield. And that's what I was hoping that this sequel would do with T'Challa. Now don't get me wrong, I know that in the later comics, T'Challa's sister Shuri ultimately becomes the new Black Panther, and the rumors from this movie hinted that she would be taking over the role. But coming into this movie, I fear that this decision would take away from the story, because up until this point in the series, Shuri has shown absolutely no ability to defeat her enemies in one-on-one combat, yet her first villain is one of the strongest characters in the comics in Namor. So with all that being said, I came into this experience pretty skeptical of what type of movie the sequel would be. And over the course of this video, I'll be discussing how the sequel is different from the first Black Panther. I will also discuss what I liked and disliked about the movie, and I will end the review with an overall rating, as well as whether this movie exceeded my expectations or fell short. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. Now, if I had to explain how Wakanda Forever is different from the first Black Panther movie, I would say that there are 3 major differences. The first is that the villain Namor gets a fully fleshed out origin story, whereas Killmonger only got a few minutes that help explain his motivations for why he was a villain in the first movie. The second major difference is that the overall message for this movie centers around dealing with the death of loved ones. In the first Black Panther movie, the overall message was of T'Challa becoming a better man and king than his father was. And the third difference is the runtime. Wakanda Forever has a longer runtime than the first movie, and a lot of that runtime is filled with exposition and scenes of the main characters dealing with their grief. I felt every bit of this difference as the runtime impacted how I enjoyed the movie. Speaking of how I enjoyed the movie, here are a few things that I liked about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. First, I want to talk about the acting. I liked all the acting performances in the movie. I think Letitia Wright, Angela Bassett, and Lupita Nyong'o give stellar performances for their respective characters, and they were just a cut above the rest. I also like the guy who played Namor. I haven't seen him in any other movie outside of this one, but I'll definitely be checking his work out from here on out. I also like the special effects in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I think the special effects in this movie, in conjunction with the cinematography, were a vast improvement from the first Black Panther. I like the costume design for the movie, as well as the new weapon designs. The energy daggers that were used in this movie were also used by Black Panther in the comics and the animated series, and I thought that their use in this movie was a nice Easter egg. And finally, I liked how the movie was able to honor Chadwick Boseman as a hero that many people knew him to be. I think that a number of people who watch this movie will be overwhelmed with emotion when they see the tributes to Chadwick Boseman. However, there were a few things that I did not like about this movie. First, there was the overall story. I won't go too deep into the spoilers, but from a storytelling perspective, it would have been nice for the movie to have some sort of explanation as to how T'Challa died. We really don't go into that in this movie. I also think that the motivations of Namor were pretty weak. In my opinion, the issue that Namor had with Wakanda could have been settled amicably if he and Shuri just sat down and used their combined intelligence to reach a compromise. A lot of senseless deaths and damage could have been avoided if the movie took this route. I think Riri Williams as Ironheart was a nice addition to the movie, but I think her character being introduced in this movie was kind of like Spider-Man being introduced in Captain America Civil War. It seemed like a reason for her character to be shoehorned into the plot and set up for future movies down the line. Another part of the storytelling that I did not like was how Namor was essentially an incompetent yet merciful leader. He was in a position to take out all of Wakanda, and instead of doing so, he gave the Wakandans a week of prep time to which they used to defeat him. Next, there was Martin Freeman and Julia Dreyfus' characters in the movie. In my opinion, their characters really didn't do anything significant in the plot. And once Martin Freeman's character served his purpose, he really didn't need to be in any additional movie scenes. Now, I was a little on the fence about Shuri's Black Panther. As I mentioned earlier, Shuri never displayed any level of hand-to-hand combat skills prior to being in this movie. Yet in this movie, once she becomes Black Panther, she seemingly has more strength than T'Challa did when he was Black Panther, and this was a tad bit on the unrealistic side. I also was not a fan of the movie's pacing. This movie is over 2.5 hours long, and with this movie being a comic book movie, there were seemingly fewer action scenes in this movie than there were in the first Black Panther, and for me, that dragged the movie in some areas as a result. Lastly, I want to talk about the final battle. To me, the final battle was somewhat of a letdown. Shuri and company easily figured out how to defeat Namor prior to the battle, but they made next to no preparation in fending off Namor's army. Now, of course, if the Wakandans made those preparations, then the final battle scene would have probably been only 2 minutes long. But that's just my opinion. Now, overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give Black Panther Wakanda Forever a solid 6. I appreciate the movie for what it is, but in the spirit of fairness, I have to be honest. The movie fell a little short of surpassing my expectations, but I also have to admit that my expectations were a little high. I think that the average person that watches this movie will like it for what it is, and in some parts of the movie, they will be overwhelmed with emotions. And this marks the end of my review. Normally I post reviews for Hell's Kitchen on Thursday nights, but I'll post my review for tonight's episode on tomorrow morning. But if you have any questions or comments related to my review, feel free to post them in the comment section below, and I'll reply to everybody. Until next time, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.